So PFL 6 of the regular season in 2023 is going to be taking place this weekend, and these are my predictions for the card. Before we do get into it though, you've got my 3-day free trial for the We Want Picks premium content just over there, and also you do have my BetUS link where you can get a 125% sign up bonus by signing up with the link in the description and also the code in the description as well. And as always, let's just get straight into the picks. I do believe that the bout order might change in the time that the card starts, but for now, when I'm recording the video, this is the first fight. Jarrah Hussein Al-Salahi taking on Zach Jusola, and what a fight! Zach Jusola wasn't in his last fight, am I right? I mean, he took on Brandon Jenkins, and those guys went to war. It was a very fun fight. It wasn't very technical for a welterweight fight, and it was just two guys that were really trying to bang it out. And Jarrah Hussein Al-Salahi is coming off a KO loss to Busai, which is interesting because I really don't consider Busai as a guy that KOs people all that often, but unfortunately for Jarrah Hussein Al-Salahi, this really hasn't kind of lived up to the hype potentially, because he is the one and only guy to actually defeat Abduragimov, who has actually now been signed to the UFC and is a great prospect. But, you know, he come into PFL, he had success in the Challenger Series, knocking out a 7-6 opponent. Then he beat T-Bell in a fight which you could argue that he lost, potentially. And now he's lost twice since. He was actually meant to fight Cedric Doumbé, but Doumbé pulled out of that fight. So now he's taking on Zach Jusola, who's stepping in on short notice. And Zach Jusola is a guy that can scrap. But one thing I'm going to say is this guy is not technical whatsoever. And I do believe Jarrah Hussein Al-Salahi should be able to win this fight. But you've got to consider this. Jarrah Hussein Al-Salahi was knocked out 6 weeks ago. Like, that's what I don't really like about the PFL tournament. He was KO'd 6 weeks ago and he's just ready to fight Zach Jusola. Now, Zach Jusola is better than his record suggests. I actually did pick him to beat Joseph Whitner way back when, but I didn't pick him to beat Brandon Jenkins. And he beat Brandon Jenkins. You could argue maybe he lost, but the point is, Jusola can scrap. Maybe he finds a KO on Jarrah Hussein Al-Salahi. The pick is Al-Salahi, but I'm very wary of him getting KO'd recently. And just in general, he just really hasn't lived up to the hype. But now we move on to Abdullah al-Qahtani taking on Lamar Brown. And this is a very interesting fight. Now, Abdullah al-Qahtani is the best fighter out of Saudi Arabia. And it's not really that close because Abdullah al-Qahtani kind of is Saudi Arabia's only MMA prospect that does have a lot of professional MMA experience. And I tried to figure out what medal he was wearing, but I couldn't really find anything. I thought it was maybe something to do with the Olympics, but it's not. So it's interesting. But what Abdullah al-Qahtani does do is he kind of boxes and wrestles in a kind of like standard boxing wrestling sort of style, and he does work to get his opponents down, but when he's on the feet, this guy is wild, man. He throws combinations and he just kind of scraps in the pocket. His fights can be very fun and very entertaining to watch. Now, Lamar Brown hasn't fought much at all. You know, he's only fought 3 times in the last 5 years. I watched him fight Chris Mims, and dude, recently when I've been watching tape on fighters, I'm watching some brutal finishes, man, and this was one of them. Chris Mims didn't tap to a rear naked choke, and the ref just fell asleep on the job, and Chris Mims was out cold from the rear naked choke for a long time. And it's kind of like when I was researching Chippy Mariscal for the UFC, I watched the most brutal KO I've ever seen in his loss to Joanderson Brito. It's crazy, these things that I'm finding when I'm watching these fights. But anyway, all that aside, I am picking al-Qahtani to win this fight. I don't have odds for any of the fights, by the way. I can't find them. FightOdds.io's not got them. Best Fight Odd doesn't have them. BetOnline doesn't have them. So I'm kind of just going off picks, really, when it comes to it. And I am picking al-Qahtani to win. But I wouldn't bet this fight, even if you do get, like, interesting odds. And the same thing as well with this fight. I wouldn't bet this fight either, because I've got no idea how good Brian Searcher really is. Because I was watching his fight against this guy, I believe it was this fight against Scotty Stockman. And as a featherweight, he kind of gassed out in the first 3 minutes. It was insane. Like, he was gassed out in the first 3 minutes. He was falling all over the place in the first round. He was tired in the first 3 minutes of the fight. And yeah, he's kind of come back with a couple of good wins, but over not really the best opponents in the world. I guess a win over David Evans, who was 5-1 at the time, is good. But this guy, Mike Bardsley's 3-0. He once again hasn't really fought anyone good. So this is a fight that's going to tell you how good either of the two are, because we just don't really know how good they are in general. But both guys seem to be grapplers. Both guys seem to specialize in the rear naked choke. But I'm going to pick Zercher to win. but it's not a confident pick just because I have seen Zercher gas out in 3 minutes, which is just not a good look at all. But I'm going to pick him to win, and I wouldn't bet on this fight at all, no matter what the odds are, honestly. And then we move on. Alex Martinez taking on Bruno Miranda. I'm going to pick Bruno Miranda in this fight. Bruno Miranda has really impressed me recently, and he actually looked really good in his last fight when he took on Ahmed Amir. Now, Ahmed Amir, I believe, is a former Olympic wrestler himself from Egypt, and he shot for so many takedowns against Miranda, and Miranda defended every single one of them and just boxed him up on the feet. I'm really, really surprised Miranda wasn't able to finish that fight, because he was landing shots on Amir over and over and over again, but he never got too aggressive, and he ended up winning the fight by decision. But Amir's got a chin on him, man. Before that, he did KO this guy called Carson Frey, I believe, on like the PFL Contender Series, if I'm not mistaken. But Alex Martinez himself is a pretty good prospect, you know. He doesn't have the best record in the world, but he did lose to Loic Radzhabov, who's now in the UFC, and then he beat Stevie Ray and Clay Collard. I thought Clay Collard should have won that fight, actually, but he's having close fights with good fighters somewhat early on into his career. I guess now at this point he has had 14 fights, so you can't really say he's inexperienced anymore. But I do think Bruno Miranda wins this fight, man. Bruno Miranda is a really good striker. You can see that he trains out of Tiger Muay Thai, and he's aggressive. He's an aggressive kickboxer, man. I would say he probably throws more punches than kicks, but he does have brutal leg kicks. He likes to scrap it out on the feet. He's technical. He's powerful. And I think he might land on Alex Martinez. I don't think anyone has ever actually finished Alex Martinez. Excuse me as I try to figure out how to use a mouse. No one's finished Alex Martinez. Miranda really might be able to be that first guy to do it. But I'm going to pick Miranda to kind of just outstrike Martinez in this matchup. I don't know what the odds are. I would assume that they might be quite close. And then we move on to Carlos Leal taking on Delano Taylor. And talk about a bad pick. I picked David Zawada to beat Carlos Leal, by the way, guys. And let's just say it didn't age very well whatsoever, because Carlos Leal won that fight in like 2 minutes or something. He kind of went out there and did something that I've never really seen him do before, and that was just be aggressive and land early and find the KO. And he's taking on Delano Taylor, who got KO'd 7 weeks ago. You see a little bit of a theme of this card. These guys got KO'd recently and they're back. He just fought Umalatov, who KO'd him, and now he's back against Carlos Leal, who's coming off a KO win. So MMA math would suggest that Carlos Leal wins this fight by KO, and normally I would say MMA math isn't really something that you should rely on, but in this fight, I mean, Leal should KO Taylor. Taylor's been KO'd recently. He did fight Busai on short notice for the championship a few months ago. He did beat Rory McDonald, which was a crazy good win for him. Knocked out Rory McDonald, and once again he got KO'd again. So he's been KO'd twice in 10 months, you know, and KO'd as recently as 7 weeks ago. So definitely something to watch out for. Carlos Leal, though, a decent striker. For the most part, I would say that his game is in the striking. But, yeah, he just went out there and KO'd David Zawada. Made me look like an idiot. I thought Zawada was going to mix it up with the wrestling. He never got the opportunity to do that. So, yeah, give me Leal. I think Leal might eventually just find the KO blow on Delano Taylor. But Taylor does have a very interesting style where he does like to fight from range. And with a reach advantage and a height advantage, maybe he could pull that off against Carlos Leal here, but I think Leal might close the distance and then land something on Delano Taylor as he kind of rushes in. Nathan Schultz taking on Raush Manthefield. This is interesting because Nathan Schultz is coming off a really, really impressive victory against Stevie Ray, where he out-grappled Stevie Ray all 3 rounds, looked really, really good doing it, and Raush Manthefield is coming off that win over Alex Martinez, who I just talked about earlier, and before that he did lose to OAM, but OAM is the champion and just beat Shane Burgos, so, you know, that's not too bad of a loss, but I think Nathan Schultz is the pick. Nathan Schultz is a really good fighter. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he is a champion of a couple of years ago. I believe it was in, maybe not, yeah, 2019, I think he won. So, yeah, he won in 2019 against Loic Radzhabov. And then he took a bit of time off, and then he's had kind of mixed success since then. He submitted Jeremy Stevens, but I think he's going to come out here, and I think he's going to out-grapple Raush Manthefield. I think he's going to take down Raush Manthefield, who was a good grappler himself, but we just saw Nathan Schultz out-grapple Stevie Ray, and I know Stevie Ray, you know, it's kind of his second year fighting after coming off retirement, but I think Nathan Schultz showed good enough grappling, good enough control in that fight to be able to do a similar match, similar sort of style to Raush Manthefield. So give me Nathan Schultz to be able to out-grapple Raush Manthefield in this matchup. And now we've got Magomed Umalatov taking on Naib Lopez. And if you guys can believe it, Naib Lopez is a Mexican wrestler, and Magomed Umalatov is a Russian boxer. So it's interesting how that kind of works. But Magomed Umalatov, he's a striker. He's a good striker. I mean, you don't get to 13-0 over decent levels of competition without being a decent striker. And this man, he does KO people, dude. He's fun to watch. You know, he knocked out Delano Taylor in 90 seconds. He knocked out Jarrah Hussein Al-Salahi in less than a round. And now he's taking on Naib Lopez, who I believe is lying about his age. To be honest, allegedly, I'm not going to throw an allegation out there, but Naib Lopez, I believe, is something like listed at like 32 years old on the PFL website. He does look a lot older than that. And when I first saw this guy pop up on PFL, I'm going to be honest, I'd never heard of him before. When he made his debut, and I was like, how have I never seen this 15-0 fighter before? It doesn't make sense. And then I started watching his fights, and I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense why I wouldn't have heard of him. Because although he does have good wins, the way that he fights, he doesn't look like a guy that should be 15-0. He's a boxer wrestler for the most part. He did out-wrestle Ivan Valenzuela up a weight class, which was impressive. Finished him late in the fight after he gassed out. Then he out-wrestled Shane Mitchell, which once again is a pretty impressive win. But when it comes to fighting Magomed Umalatov, I genuinely believe Magomed Umalatov is going to knock out Naib Lopez in the very first round, and it's going to be a really good finish on Magomed Umalatov's record. So give me Magomed Umalatov by first round KO. This guy's aggressive, this guy's a good striker, and as you can imagine, if he has to wrestle, he can wrestle, but he is a striker for the most part, and I think he knocks out Lopez in the very first round by being a significantly better striker and being able to defend any wrestling offense that Lopez might be able to try and put on him. Then we move on. Magomed Kirimov taking on my new favorite fighter, David Zawada. Just kidding. David Zawada did make me look like an idiot though. But in this matchup, I am going to pick Magomed Kirimov. And one thing you'll notice about Magomed Kirimov is, although I don't have odds right now, he always is a ridiculously big favorite. I wouldn't be surprised if Kirimov ends up being like minus 1,000. I'm being serious. Like, this guy is always a massive favorite in his fights. Now, we did lose to Ray Cooper III in the 2021 finals, and then I don't think he ended up being in the 2022 championship, or I don't really know what happened in that situation, but the point is he never really made it there. And then he fought this guy called Benagli, and then against Benagli, he was like a minus 1,500 favorite, something absolutely ridiculous. And he fought Benagli with no respect whatsoever. The first thing he did was march forward. He knew that he was the better fighter than Benagli and just went for it. He just went for the finish. He went for the KO, and it was very impressive. And that's not how Magomed Kirimov normally fights. Kirimov normally does kind of like to out-wrestle people to a decision, like he did beat Gleison Tibau, but in that fight he actually looked really unimpressive in my opinion, and I believe that was at 175 pounds as well. That was like a weird situation. That was a weird fight, but anyway, he didn't look that good in that fight, but he likes to out-wrestle people. David Zawada kind of mixes up his striking with his wrestling, right? We kind of saw that in his UFC run, and then since then, when he took on this guy, Erhan Katal, he looked really good in that fight as well, which is why I picked him to beat Carlos Leal. But Magomed Kirimov is just a good fighter. He's going to out-wrestle David Zawada if he wants to, and he probably could try and land something on the feet if he wants to as well. So I'm going to go with Magomed Kirimov. I wouldn't be as confident in him getting a finish as everybody else, but once again, David Zawada did get knocked out 7 weeks ago. I mean, come on. I mean, at this point, it's just kind of, it's a bit dodgy, isn't it? Like, making guys fight again after getting KO'd recently. It's just not a good look. But anyway, Clay Collard now taking on Stevie Ray. This fight could be interesting because both guys have different styles, right? Clay Collard, pretty much a boxer, is kind of his style. He's coming off that war against Yamato Nishikawa, where he took a lot of damage to his legs. You know, Nishikawa was really working him in that fight, and he did manage to win, but he took a lot of time off MMA to focus on a boxing career. He actually did have a lot of mixed success, and when I was actually watching boxing and getting into boxing, I believe it's this fighter here, Viktor Malakuziev, fought Clay Collard, and he recently beat Gabriel Rosado in a rematch. If you guys know who Gabriel Rosado is, you will realize that is actually quite a big deal that he managed to fight this guy as Clay Collard, you know, as the boxer. But anyway, the point is, Collard does have good boxing, and he does translate it well to MMA, but Stevie Ray's a grappler. We know what Stevie Ray does. You know, he took a lot of time off after his UFC run. He retired, and then he come back after a few years. Now, unfortunately, I do have a feeling I know why he came back. It has something to do with his family. I don't know if you guys know or not, but Stevie Ray is definitely fighting for another cause right now, probably to make money to fund that situation that's going on. But he's actually had some good success. He did beat Anthony Pettis twice, and that's good wins. Like, that's impressive. But now he's going to have to go out there against Clay Collard, and if he wants a shot at winning that $1 million, he's going to have to finish Clay Collard. But I don't think that this fight goes to the ground. Clay Collard, once again, he also fought Anthony Pettis. Not really a similar matchup, but somewhat, because we know that Anthony Pettis is a fantastic grappler. He did recently win a boxing match against Roy Jones Jr., and yes, that happened, but I think Clay Collard can keep the fight on the feet and win a decision by beating Stevie Ray on the feet. But maybe Stevie Ray can kind of follow the Yamato Nishikawa fight and really try and chop those legs down and really try and make something happen there. But I do have Clay Collard to win that fight. I just pushed the wrong button. Anyway, now we move on. Shane Burgos taking on Yamato Nishikawa. Yamato Nishikawa, if you guys don't know, this guy was briefly actually signed to the UFC and was meant to make his debut against Magomedov Mustafayev. Now, there was a lot of different sort of reasons why this fight didn't happen. Nishikawa was claiming that Mustafayev pulled out due to injury. Mustafayev was claiming that Nishikawa had a contract dispute with Shuto. Who really knows what happened? But the point is, I was really looking forward to Nishikawa being in the UFC. Like, this guy at the time was less than 20 years old with like 30 MMA fights. Like, is that not ridiculous just in general? This guy's 20 and a half years old and he has had 30 MMA fights as a pro. That's ridiculous, right? And now he's taking on Shane Burgos. I don't like this fight for Nishikawa, in my opinion, like, at all. Nishikawa's a tough dude, though, man. Like, we know that Nishikawa can come to scrap, and he will be a live underdog against anybody. But, man, this is a fight which, I'm going to be honest, I think the UFC is... not the UFC, sorry. I think the PFL is really trying to capitalize on Shane Burgos' name and get him a win in this fight. Because Burgos, dude, at 155, he is massive, right? He looks really big for 155. Like, he was a former featherweight, and he looked blown up. He looked big at 155. And then Yamato Nishikawa is a small lightweight. Like, this guy's not big for lightweight at all. Like, Yamato Nishikawa is always going to be there. But at the end of the day, Shane Burgos is Shane Burgos. And he is a better fighter than Nishikawa. I think Shane Burgos probably finds the chin of Nishikawa. But Nishikawa's a tough guy, man. Like, he has been KO'd in his career before, but man, he was eating some shots from Clay Collard, and he was still coming forward, dude. He's there to scrap, man, and I think that Shane Burgos, unfortunately, might find something. A lot of people are giving Nishikawa that respect, though, with the chin, but I do think Burgos probably finds that KO blow on the feet. And now we move on to Sato Busai versus Shane Mitchell. I'm going to go Sato Busai. I mean, Shane Mitchell kind of mixes up everything. Like, he's a striker, and he can wrestle and grapple as well. And a lot of these fights, like, they're actually very hard to find on the regional scene. But Sato Busai, we know what he does at this point. He's actually the former champion of the PFL because he beat Delano Taylor in that matchup to win the $1 million, and he knocked out Jarrah Hussein al-Salahi. So he's kind of under no pressure. All he's really got to do is win against Shane Mitchell, and he's going to be in the next round. And I think that's what he's going to do. I think he's going to be able to just be the better striker and piece up Shane Mitchell from range. Maybe he can find a KO, maybe he can't. But I think what's going to happen here is just Sato Busai is going to use his longer frame and his better striking to just kind of piece up Shane Mitchell for 3 rounds. Maybe he finds a KO blow, maybe he doesn't, but I'm going to pick Sato Busai to win this fight by keeping the fight on the feet and winning a decision. Once again, the odds are probably ridiculous, but I do think Sai can win. And then we move on to OEM taking on Anthony Romero. And OEM's just gonna do what OEM does. And unfortunately for the PFL, the lightweight champion, now lightweight arguably across any promotion whatsoever, is a very exciting division and probably is the most exciting division in MMA. But unfortunately for PFL, their best lightweight, their lightweight champion, is super unmarketable. Like, OEM, he fought Shane Burgos. He made a Shane Burgos fight boring. Like, come on, man. No one does that. Like, he just kind of... Like, I know he KO'd Stevie Ray, but, like, he doesn't do that. That's not his style. You know, he's a wrestler. He's a grappler. He likes to be a human backpack. And Anthony Romero is a decent prospect. Out of Canada, probably the best Canadian prospect. Maybe not signed to the UFC, because... I guess there's some, but you know what I mean. Like, he's a he's a decent fighter. He went to a split decision with Zach Gisola, who's lower down on this card. I mean, he's beaten Mike Breeden, who had a UFC run, but I just can't see him being able to defend the takedowns, keep the fight on the feet, which is where he's going to want it, and just stop OEM from taking him down, taking his back, and trying to choke him out or finish him with ground and pound. So give me OEM, but I think there's a really good chance that he might find a finish, just kind of with the way that he's able to take the back of his opponents. But it's Olivier Aubin mostly. He will find a way to make it go to decision. And with that being said, it's kind of all of the picks for the card. I tried to make it somewhat quick because I do actually have to fly out back home after the semester tomorrow. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, I will see you guys in the next one.